thing is very dialed in into like doing the style really well. This is a cool track and it's really really fun to listen to. So let's just dive into some of the stuff. You sent a few talking points. Okay, so you tried listening to it on a friend's portable speaker and no bass. And I think we can dial that in. I'm seeing some stuff, I'm hearing some stuff. And there's some stuff that we can do to get this fixed up. And then you mentioned that the vocals were extra band passed to deliberately sound weird. And yeah, absolutely. They definitely deliberately sound weird. It sounds very purposeful and it really fits the song. So, no complaints there. That sounds great. Let's look at this low end. So what I was hearing was there's not a lot of separation of the low end elements in the mix. So everything's kind of flubbing against each other. And when we're trying to get really, really tight low end reproduction out of like a consumer speaker, like that's one of the things that's gonna push it over the top. Now, mind you, like most portable speakers, they're able to replicate accurately down to maybe 100. So if that's our target, it's never a great target to hit because it's just inherently not amazing. But it does reveal something about your mix. If you're getting significantly less low end out of one of those kind of mid-rangey speakers than like a pro mix. And really what's going on in that low end is the kick and the sub like bass thing going on. It's just very, very, very non-separated. So we got to carve out some space for the kick and the bass to live. So I'm going to go ahead, like that's what I'm hearing. And I always, I love a frequency graph because then we can see what's going on. But we always want to like identify something like with our ears first. And then we can use like a visual medium to like really, really see what's going on. And then when I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, it's a little bit smeary down in the low end. So let's go ahead and grab the Paz and just look for low end.
Větrným tunelem ohlašují změny, jejich znění jasný není všem. Bytostem, co s cynismem se protírají nekonečnou bažinou svých vzpomínek z doby minulých, co znovu prožijí nestěhnou a jedním z nich na konci se sám svým životem si ty. Nápadný a přesto skrytý oceán.
Okay, so I'm just taking out all of that high-end information just so we can listen to what's happening in the lows. And, if folks are listening to this on their laptops or, we might not hear this at all. So we're just going to... So I've got this totally cut down and I'm not hearing like any snap or punch down in this low region. It's just kind of like everything below 100 is just whoa, 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 like that sound. And when we don't have any definition below 100, because like here we are, we're just straight up. Okay, so we're at 90. I'm going to open this up to 100. I still don't have like attack or definition down there. We're still just like very, 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 very indistinct. So the kick doesn't have any punch. It's not punching out from the mud. And then the bass tones, I'm not really getting any note data there. It's just kind of flubby. Let's see where it starts to get good. Okay. So when I open it up, like 175, that's where it starts to feel like I'm actually experiencing music. So it's just there's just way too much happening down there. We don't have any definition in those instruments. So the first thing that I would do to address it, and then this is why it doesn't feel powerful in the low end on like a portable speaker, because portable speakers, their low end is like maybe 100 hertz to 200 hertz. So if we're not really getting anything useful until we're almost to 200 hertz, then there's no low end to the mix, really. So first things first, I would high pass. There's a lot of junk below 20. So just like get rid of that, because that's just eating up space in your lows. So you could high pass your kick and high pass your bass to 20, no problem. The next thing I would do is your bass isn't doing anything for you up until 100. Like it's not benefiting your mix. So I would just cut pretty heavily up to 100 from that bass so that the kick can have a nice punchy thump. Like definitely at 60 and like even maybe all the way up to 100, but like a narrow kick is probably the way to go. So just cut tons of stuff out of your bass and like all of your instruments, like everything. Just get rid of stuff from 20 to 60 or like 20, 60, 70, you know. Sorry, I got something in my throat. That region from 20 to 70, it just sounds like there's way too much happening there, and you got to just pull info away from like any instrument. Like take a look at everything that's happening there and just cut from like everything but the kick. And then from 100 to 200, that's like where the bass like can really like shine and live. And even when I'm just listening to just 100 to 200, there's like the knock of the kick is there, and that's going to interfere with like the intelligibility of the bass. Like we're not going to get the transient response that we're going to want. So like get rid of the kick from 100 to 200, like do a pretty good cut right there, and just try to squeeze some excitement out of the bass in that region. So we're talking about like pull up a Pultec or an SSL or like some sort of analog model EQ, and just dial in like a boost at 100. Like try to make it a little more exciting, or you could try like a little bit of distortion in that region if you have like a multi-band harmonic saturation plugin, and just try to make 100 to 200 just a little bit spicier, because it's just like a lot of missed opportunity in that region, because that's like where it can get really cool and exciting. So yeah, clean up to 200 hertz, like in summary. Just cut, go crazy. And let's go ahead, let's just open it up. And then like definitely get rid of everything. 20. So, I mean, awesome song. And, really normal problem to have. It's like you have a lot of information in the low end, but it's just not detailed information. So, I mean, then we're going to have to look at, like, if there's a drum sample being used, maybe try a different drum sample. If it's a live kick, then we got to change the EQ a little bit, make it a little more exciting, a little more detailed down there. And then look at your compression settings. Make sure that you're not clamping down too fast with your compressor. That's also something that could be happening down there. It seems like we're losing a lot of transient response in that low end. So open up your attack times if you're compressing, and just let a little more of the transient, a little more of the poke get through, and that's going to also help it translate onto smaller speakers. The and maybe a little less gain reduction all in all, maybe worth taking a look at. The other thing that I was noticing on this mix is it's weighted to the left side a little too much. Like if we take a look, and it's the guitar that's doing it. I'm being really nitpicky at this point, but there's just a few moments where you've got a lot of stereo space happening, and it just pulls to one side a little too heavy for just a little too long. So if you're doing like dramatic pans, just be very, very careful about like counterbalancing it. We're going to run into issues in the master if it's too like wildly different from left to right volume wise, like average loudness over time, then we're just not going to be able to push the entire thing to max volume as cleanly as we could. So that's kind of where we're at on that. That is me nitpicking and being super picky. So awesome track. I think it sounds really nice and warm and well produced, like everywhere from 200 to 20K, just that low stuff. Clean it up. So thank you for sending that track. I'd love to hear what you wind up doing with it. And, that goes for anybody. If you send something in, you can send in a revision the next day. We're going to be here every day. So that's the fun thing about this. Listening to it. Okay, room's not treated. There we go. So if your room's not treated, then you're going to be really susceptible to first off, like some, smushy bass frequencies, which could explain some of that rumble in the low end. And then if you have pings and pops coming off of your walls, then everything above 2K, you might be getting like doubling or pinging and all that. And that could account for like feeling like it's uncomfortable above 2K. So what you can do is for like relatively cheap, you could set up a reflection-free zone between your speakers and your ears. So all you got to do, like, no foam, none like the Orlex stuff, but like the rigid room treatment like the Prima Acoustic. You can get that for just like a few panels, you know, for like $100, $150. And you just put the panels between your ears and your speakers, and that sets up a reflection-free zone. And as far as just immediate bang for your buck, setting up an RFZ is going to take care of a whole lot of issues for the least amount of cash. Like, you don't have to go crazy on bass traps and diffusers and a cloud and all that. I mean, like, eventually you would want to, but as far as just um, the thing that'll get you the furthest as far as room treatment is just setting up an RFZ. And you can do that for not a terrible amount of money. And it's easy, and you don't have to like take a bunch of measurements and all that. Just make it so that it's not pinging between you and your speakers. So, and you were wondering, how does one know when a track is ready for mastering? And that is a super excellent question. And I'm happy to dive into that before we listen. Your track is ready for mastering when it's done. Like, your track is ready for mastering when you are not expecting the track to get any better. So this is a philosophical thing in that never expect your track to get better or get fixed by mastering. The best master, like the best final master of your track, is going to come from a great mix. The quality of master is always dependent on the quality of mix. So you want to have absolutely no desires for your track beyond just having it fit in with the world at large. And then as a bonus, like, a mastering engineer will do just like that one magic tweak to like, oh, and we're talking about like a good mastering engineer is going to move the dial like 1 dB, 1.5 dB, you know, and we're going to just dial in our ears. The room is dialed in, and we're going to listen to your track and go like, oh yeah, it needs 1 dB boosted at 1.5K. And it's going to be that one move that like pushes the track over the edge. And if you've done a fantastic mix and then you get back the master and you know you're already happy with your mix, and then that like one final move happens, then you're just going to be like, wow, my track is totally opened up. And that's what a great master does, is it's just like that last final little bit of icing that second set of ears does, and it just smooths it out. And the most important thing that mastering does is it just makes sure that your tracks are consistent throughout an album, and also consistent within the like genre and the zeitgeist, and that it's going to fit in on a playlist, so that your track doesn't sound like empty or weak or soft or too loud and all of that, and that it'll just like play consistently throughout the world. So when is your mix ready for mastering? When you have absolutely no more expectations for your mix. That's kind of the long and the short of it. First off, I would argue that it doesn't sound as good as when we just have like a nice dynamic range, the peaks and valleys between like moment to moment in the piece. So first off, it's like a sound thing. It's a sonic thing. It's a quality thing. We want to have a nice, healthy, dynamic range. The other thing that we got to think about is that dynamic range is what Spotify, YouTube, Tidal, every single major streaming service, when you upload through a distributor, there's a computer. It's not a human that's forgiving or reasonable. It's just a cruel computer program, and it's going to look at what your dynamic range is on the track. And if your dynamic range is too limited, like if it's hitting 3, 4 DR, then that computer, before it gets uploaded to Spotify, is going to do some wacky compression, limiting, and just like destructive stuff to your mix. You're not going to know for sure what's going to come out on the other end of that algorithm. You're not in control of it anymore. So what we want to do to make sure that what we're mixing is translating to our audience when we go to a major streaming platform is we want to have a really healthy dynamic range. DR7 is what I'm generally aiming for, to make like a loud master. DR7. That's like pushing it to not get touched by the Spotify robots. And this mix is hitting like DR2 too much, and which also goes into that low end issue again, because what's crushing the dynamic range is low end. When we see the bass back off, we see our dynamic range expand. Few things that could be worth taking a look at. The snare really fits the song. It's like really snappy, like plenty of snare on it, but I feel like I'm missing a lot of like the body and the thwack. And it sounds, I could be totally wrong, but I think that's like a sample or an electronic snare. You can let me know. But I would take a look at, with just good old EQ, pull up like SSL or a Pultec style, and give it something, like give it a boost between 200 and 300. Like that'll just to get like some body on that backbeat. It's really nice in the top end, like really smooth, really present, but we could probably get some meat down between 200 and 300 on that snare. If you're using samples in an electronic kick, okay, cool, yeah, Logic drum sample. There's two ways, like pull up an EQ and give it a boost at 200, or layer another snare in under it, one that has a little more body, and just bring it up in the mix until it feels like we're just getting some push down in that region. Sometimes if you're already dealing with samples, sometimes it's better to just grab a sample that just has that sound in it rather than trying to just mess with your EQ. So check your phase, line it up, do all of that picky stuff. So snare, give it some body. It's also bordering on samey. It's a little bit rigid in the in its sampleness. You could play around with some round robin sampling, where you have like 4 variations that are very subtle within the snare. Slightly different strikes, slightly different hits, because it feels a little bit robotic. And there's so much like really nice organic tones happening in this song. Like it's really nice, and that snare kind of stands out in its steadiness, which is, we want a steady snare, but we also want it to be just a little hints, like, or you could do like filter automation just to give it a little bit of breath and life. So yeah, that's snare talk,
Jekyll Hyde, I'll keep my vials close. I've got a new braid, interior redecorate, switching up the lamp shades, telescoping every coat of paint, working the foot up on my bed, levitating. Since then I haven't put a foot on the pavement. Next stretch I'm feeling feathered face down in the leg, black swan baby, I'll blend no beret. Eerie, on lookers on the street, yeah, you wanna get a PP. might feel tall now. Memories are kinda cold. Caving in at the throats. You carry shit's blown. It's a show. News trucks pulling up. Looking like a parking lot. A bar on my block. Jake chilling hard. I kill them all for the camera suit. As it's all me. Like the dogs. Like I'm never get the shot. With the blue and smoke still over my shoulder. Ribbon dancing with the yellow tape. I'm a home runner. On the Dutch train, hide me. I need you on my side. But the T-best news fails. If 2020 no get on this slice, please. We're breaking both the hemispheres.
I absolutely love your stuff. It's so cool. It goes all over the place, but it absolutely just uh I mean, I listen to so much music every single day, and whenever something just makes me go like, what is even happening? It's so satisfying. This is such a cool thing. Um Definitely let's like talk about a few things, especially low end. Um it's a bit indistinct below 100. I think stuff could get taken away and it could get shaved out a little bit. And that kick is hitting at 30, which and it's very hot. It's very hot at 30. And we were kind of I was actually talking about this yesterday to David. Um, Whenever we have our kick that low, and by all means, it's cool to have the fundamental down at 30, but we have to have immaculately clean low end like everywhere else, because the lower we're going, the more energy we need to make it happen. So if your kick's at 30, make sure that your bass isn't touching 30 at all. Really, you're like, if your kick's down at 30, make sure that everything is clear, like up to 60. Like just give that whole thing to that fundamental, because we're just not going to feel the pulse. And that's like my feel and my read on this track is there's like a ton, there's just lots and lots and lots of low end happening, but I'm not feeling it pushing me to the beat. So it's just got to get cleaned up. Shave stuff away to clear room for that kick at 30, or consider getting a sample that's got a fundamental at like 60. Then you can get away with a little bit less and you'll be able to get it going more. This is such a busy mix. I'm even wondering if like a metal kick, like up at 90, like a very throaty kick, maybe that's going to cut through a little more. And I don't know, maybe that's the move. So like your two options in your low end are to aggressively cut things around that kick between 30 and 60 hertz, and also just make sure that it's pretty clean from 60 to 100. Be very aggressive in those cuts. The other option would be to do like lighter cuts, but move that kick up to 60 or even 90, like go crazy. It looks like I think you should also DS around 8K in the vocal. That was just a little bit hot, so just like look out for that. And then a more philosophical thing is there is a whole lot, like I can feel it in my room and I can feel it in my head. I was like, I think that things are a little bit pushed. They're pushed out a little bit too far. And I heard it. So I was like, I think we're pushing too far to the side. That was my impression. And then I checked it in mono, and it wasn't just like, we weren't just losing like high frequencies, we were losing entire instruments in mono. So definitely, rule of thumb, always check in mono and make sure you're okay with it. Now, as far as being okay with it, I am being kind of like a buttoned up fuddy-duddy. Like I don't think that we should lose instruments when we go from stereo to mono. Like in general, that's kind of like my rule of thumb of like pushing the sides too far. On the other hand, like the last couple Tame Impala albums absolutely totally do that. So in the like in the industry, it's kind of becoming a thing that is accepted. So I don't want to just hard and fast say that it's bad, but I definitely like nothing is ever hard and fast bad, but always make sure that you know that it's happening and make sure that you're doing it on purpose. As far as if that Tame Impala stuff is on purpose, I don't know, but it is there. You can listen to the last couple and you can take it to mono and you're like, oh, that synthesizer, like lead lines and solos disappear in mono. So, uh, I don't know, sign of the times. It's what we're doing. But I do want you to know that you're pushing things to the side and we're losing them. And I kind of think I would also make an argument for pulling it a little bit tighter because when I collapse it to mono, um, it kind of it felt a lot tighter. So we could stand to probably pull it in a little bit. Like I just felt like a little more of the grit and the punch, and maybe we're losing it too much through stereo imaging. Or aggressive mid side. So definitely take a look at that. So, Will, that's just another excellent track. So, like in summary, low end, clean it up below 100. That kick, either give it plenty of its own space to inhabit or consider getting a sample that has a fundamental higher up, 60, 70, 90. Frequency spectrum is really nice and under control. I think that it would sound even fuller if maybe we dialed back that phasiness in the high mids and like those toms, I think especially are pushed really, really far out. And then DS your vocal. It looks like it's around 8K, 7 to 9K, something like that. But awesome track. Totally love listening to your stuff. So, folks, okay, yeah, I figured. So, Windows, I mean, I'm a PC person, okay? Um, and the the struggle, I mean, there's so much that I like about working on a PC. I mean, like I built it from like my bare hands and like I know every single component. But the fact of the matter is the OS isn't rated for real-time audio, and it probably never will be. So we are constantly dealing with latency issues. So um, you got to go ahead and dial in like all of the, look up like optimized Windows audio settings and go through each and every single one and check your drivers. And it's going to take a couple hours. And you got to figure out, like, you can run a DPC latency, I think is the one that's responsible for like most of the clicks and pops. So there's like a free program called Latency Mon, and you can run that and you can see what program, like which core in your processor is getting DPC spikes, and then you can track down what driver is causing it, and then you can Google that driver and then see if you can disable it safely, and all that. So dial in your latency and your PC settings, and that should help out with those clicks and stuff. Um, and then, just set, if you're not recording live instruments and you're just doing everything, but if you're playing if you're playing those parts rather than programming them in with a sequencer, it's going to be a pain in the butt. So you've just got to optimize your system so you can get as close to real-time monitoring without getting those latency issues and clicks and dropouts and all that. Cool. Yeah, just you can do research, and at any time too, you can email me. I've done this on a ton of Windows machines. Send me like your exact specs and everything, and we can get this dialed in. It is the eternal pain of working on a Windows machine. The vocal, let me just listen. Okay, the vocal is a tiny bit buried in the mix, and I think that, be confident with your vocal because it's good. Like, that's a good, clean recording. It's a very interesting texture, and I would push it up into the mix a little bit, which we have frequency-wise some room from 2 to 4K. So, before we hit okay, vocal sync. We'll get into that. So, before we just like push the vocal up in volume, you could EQ and just see what happens if you bring it out in this like high mid region. Sometimes we're going to run into like a whistle or a nasty tone, or maybe it's sibilant there, but see if you can just push it a little bit in that region just to give it some air and some sparkle, and it'll sit on top real nice in. And it's kind of like there's all of these moments in this song and in this mix where you're bringing in these really, really cool elements, but you're hesitant to push them as far forward into the mix that they could be. Like this synth pad comes in, it's such a cool part, and if you grabbed a Pultec, because like the other thing that's happening in this mix is above 10K, huge dip. So it's a little bit dull overall, and this is an opportunity to make some stuff a little bit brighter individually. You can pick what's going to happen. So, like a really, really cool thing to take a look at would be like at this synth pad when it comes on in, just crank like 12K and see if you can just like push it forward in that way so that when it just hits your ears and it's super exciting, and it can like lift the entire mix. Right now, it's coming in and it's very musically interesting. Like from just a musician perspective, I'm like, that's a cool part, that's a cool line, that's a cool sound. But sonically, it could just change the entire nature of the mix right there. It could just blow it wide open. So just wanted to stop it right there because I can totally answer your question about that keyboard part. It is super centered in the mid-range. And I think that as far as like your sound design, because I checked out the reference that you sent me. Your approach to synthesis is totally on. It's after synthesis. It's in the mix that I think that we could push it and get this tone a little more where you want it to be. Basically, it looks like that keyboard, and it sounds like it's like very, very, very mid-range focused, and it just doesn't have any air or crispy. You asked in the email, how can I get it crisper? Well, crispy lies between like 1 to 5K, and it looks like we're just totally bare in that department. So if you want to get that a little bit crisper and a little more hi-fi and a little more polished, you got to get that 1 to 5K. just like going in the mix. So we have some interesting things happening here because you're filled out. Like it's pretty nice from, 1 to 8K. Like you have the info there, but I think that it needs to be redistributed a little bit. If you want that keyboard part to be the crispy part of the mix, you're going to need to cut that 1 to 8K region in other stuff and then bring it out in that keyboard. And that's what you're going to want to look for. That's where that crispness is. That's how it's going to push up front. I love the spirit of it, like that huge leap that happens. But I think that for this to be like a final mix, we want it to feel like it's jumping from the verse to the chorus, but not that dramatically. And specifically what I'm hearing is the bass is fundamentally changing from the verse to the chorus. It's getting a whole lot bigger, like from like 100 hertz. So that's like increasing the perceived volume and reducing dynamic range, like when we hit the chorus. I think that we want to get the bass to be sitting more in that chorus range, just a little bit less. Like if you want to do a difference between verse and chorus, I would cut the difference significantly. Like having the bass be so different from verse to chorus, it's a little too much, and it's gonna be distracting rather than like reinforcing your idea. You can do way more with less with the bass. Same with the kick. Like I love that there's the difference between the verse and the chorus, but just make it less of a difference. And yeah, so that's my feel on